What's up, guys, and welcome back to the Landship Scorpios. I'm Lieutenant Nathaniel Flint, and this is about my second or third time recording this video. Hopefully, nothing wrong will happen, but I am tired of doing it. So, let's jump immediately in. Today, we are doing the Aerial Aces expansion units. We're going to be talking about those from those work-in-progress PDFs we received oh so long ago, and I believe this is the last video for unit stats that we will be doing from work-in-progress material. Again, fulfillment is in May of 2024. Fingers crossed, no more delays. So we are finally going to be done with this and can move on to other content. So without further ado, let's jump right in and see how quickly we can get through this. And first up, we kind of covered this in the other video we did on Aerial Aces, but we're going to start with the Allied side, and we're going to start that Allied units with the B-12 Dorchester Bomber. The first thing that we will cover, which was covered more in depth in the other video, is that it is a heavy aircraft unit, and it has one plug slot. We see that it costs 3 deployment points to get into the skies. It has 3 movement, but we can see here it has that 1 minimum movement. It is an armor type 2, and it's got 3 health. So this has gotten a bit of an updated and reloaded, and has a little bit more survivability up in the air. We see that it has a ground range of 1 and it has an air range of 1. But just like we covered in that Aerial Aces rules video, we can see here that it has a 1 attack each. It's got a land only attack, so there's no aircraft symbol, which is a blast attack, and it gets 3 dice against armor type 1 and 2, and 2 dice against armor types 3 and 4. So quite devastating. And we can see on its air only attack, so this no ground symbol, that it only gets 2 dice against armor type 1. We can see it has no specials as far as these work in progress ones are concerned, so we don't have to worry about that. So right now, what are we thinking about this unit with what we know of the Aerial Aces Rivet Wars Reloaded changes to aircraft rules? Well, what we're seeing is that this is a devastating bomber unit. It is got a little bit more survivability, so a lot of the units with air range are going to need to be able to attack armor type 2 to touch it, and a lot of those units get less dice to do that with, so it's got a little bit more survivability. We can see that with the change of how air to ground land range works, it's going to have a lot longer reach to get its targets, and it's going to be devastating. I mean, it's going to be able to quickly get up to a lot of targets, and with that blast attack, be able to clear things like bunkers and strategic objectives. And it's going to be able to touch a lot of heavy armored units, which is what you're looking for. With only 2 dice against armor type 1 for its air only attack, the focus is definitely not going to be this thing being like an aerial fortress attacking the Blight aircraft. So its usage is very clear. It is meant to be a bomber against ground craft, which makes sense. And it's got the power to be very good at that job. I think that this is a very solid air unit, and I feel like what changes have been made are done in the name of maybe balance, but I feel like it's gotten a lot of buffs that feel right. Like there's a lot of flavor here. So I think this is a solid unit. Next up, we have the Polsten Quad Gun, our AA for the Allies, anti-aircraft. We see that they are a support unit with 1 plug slot. They cost 2 deployment points and 1 rivet to get out on the field. We see that they only have 1 movement, but they are armor type 2, and they do get 2 health to help them stay in the game a little longer. We see that they have 2 land range, but they also get 2 air range, which means a lot more in Aerial Aces than it did in Battle of Brighton. We see they get 2 attacks, and of those 2 attacks, we see that they have 2 dice against armor type 1 and 1 dice against armor type 2. However, a huge deal that we also need to talk about is that it has its special, where it buffs the special Anti-Air 1. This unit gains +1 dice to its attack rolls when it is attacking air units. This is probably the biggest change to the AA units in this game. That is amazing. So what are we looking at with the Polsten Quad Gun? We're looking at an AA ground unit that has a lot of range. And with this anti-air, it gets 2 attacks that are going to be 3 dice against armor type 1 and 2 dice against armor type 2. So this game is going to be really great at getting a lot of those light aircraft that are only armor type 1. And it's still going to have a decent punch against those heavier aircraft like the Zeppelin Bomber that is that armor type 2. And it's just a really solid unit. I really like the look of this. I really like the feel of this unit. It is quite strong, especially against aircraft, but it's not completely useless if you need to use it on the ground with its 2 land range. That's a decent dice. It basically makes it anti-infantry. It's very solid. I really like the design of this, and with the changes of aerial aces, I think this has a massive buff to its anti-aircraft capabilities. And the fact that it buffs anti-air gives any unit around it just that much extra help when attacking aircraft specifically. So there's not much else to say. This is a really solid unit that really, as soon as it gets on the field, aircraft will want to stay as far away from it as possible. It will completely change the dynamics of the map being out on the field. Next up, we have the F4 Buccaneer. These fighter crafts from classic Rivet Wars are now light aircraft with 1 plug slot. We see that they cost 2 deployment points to get out on the field. They have 3 movement with a minimum movement of 1. We see that they are armor type 1, but they do have 2 health. We do see that they have 1 land range and 2 air range. And with that 1 attack, they can have 2 dice against armor type 1. And they get 1 dice against armor type 2 and 1 dice against armor type 3. We got to look at their special for a second. So we see in their special, they get Air Assault 1. During the combat phase, this unit may move 1 grid before attacking. If it does, it can't move in the movement phase. So this is like the aircraft version of Rapid Assault. So instead of getting its 3 movement or a minimum of 1, it basically has to move its minimum, but it can move before attacking. And that includes a 90 degrees turn. So very good for getting it into position. We see it also as Bolster Defense 1, following with what we learned from the Nemoans, kind of reflavoring already a mechanic that's in the game, Bolster Defense, to instead say that you're just super hard to get damage or super armored. Instead, it's saying that they're very nimble, so they're just hard to hit. But it will achieve the same thing in flavor, same thing in mechanics, but with a different flavor based on the unit. So this has Bolster Defense 1. When this unit is attacked, the attacker reduces the number of dice they roll by 1 to a minimum of 1 dice. This is really good, and this is going to really help their survivability since they are armor type 1. So this is going to help it against other light aircraft that are fighting air to air. But this also helps with a lot of units, like a lot of anti-infantry or a lot of anti-armor type 1, like with air ranges that could technically shred them apart. But helping them have that 1 extra die, 1 less die, will just help their survivability all that much more. All in all, I think this is still a solid unit. This is decent to get out into the air and start harassing ground units, or to answer the Blight air superiority. This does have decent attacks against the Osprey Gunner, but it'll also be okay against their Zeppelin Bomber with at least getting to attack them. This also gets 1 dice against armor type 3, so that'll be able to go against ground tanks. So I mean, it's a solid unit. X5 Gyroplane. Next up, we have this X Scout unit from classic Rivet Wars. We see that they are a light aircraft. They cost only 1 deployment point to get into the air. We see they have 2 movement, but they have a minimum movement of 0. So they are able to just hover if you need them to do so and stay in one spot. We see that they are armor type 1 and that they have 1 health. So costing 1 deployment, they're basically like the infantry of the air. They're very cheap to get up there. They're going to be very easy to knock out of the sky, but they are not that bad of an investment like a rifleman or someone to get up in the air. So let's look at how decent they are at attacking and holding ground to see what that 1 deployment point gets you. We see they have a land range of 1, but an air range of 0. So they are only going to be attacking ground targets with that land range of 1. They get 1 chain attack, which is very interesting, where they get 2 dice against armor types 1, 2, and 3. We see that they have a special nimble. Nimble, this unit may rotate an additional time during the movement phase. So they do get 2 movement. So this gives them an extra 90-degree turn during the movement phase, just allowing them to get into position, whatever you want that to be, a lot better. So what are we looking at for this unit? We're looking at a unit that at base value might not look like it has a lot. But when we look at how Aerial Aces changed its air to ground range attacks, like how that works, we see that that 1 ground range goes a lot farther than classic Rivet Wars gyroplanes do. And all in all, this gets a serious buff. With that in mind, with that how it works, go watch that video to see how the ground range works. It can just attack a lot more ground units now. It's a lot further range from its 2 front areas based on the rule set. With it being a chain attack, it could chain through areas where blight forces are grouping. And with 2 dice against all the units it can touch, that's pretty good. It can attack a lot of tank units, which is a very good thing. It can go against like the anti-air and things. It might not be able to survive too long, but it does have a lot more use than in the other game. I didn't use a lot of the scout units. I felt like they were just a little bit too underwhelming to go up against all the other air units that I had available. I thought that the Zeppelin Scout was probably the better of the 2, but with all these changes, I can totally see why you would want to deploy an X5 gyroplane or 2 to support your advance of riflemen or your mountaineers out in the middle of like the mud of no man's land, not near the trenches. Like, honestly, I get it. This would be a good collection with an advance to either hold or try to take a like a strategic objective. This is a very good, cheap like scout unit, very good light aircraft. I really love it. I think that overall this got more buffs than it got debuffs. And I think that costing only 1 deployment point, you might not mind adding it to the meat grinder of Rivet Wars and trying your luck on some of these dice rolls. Next up, we have our hero air plug, Charles Yooger. Charles, it only costs 2 deployment points to get into any aircraft with a plug slot socket. So keeping in mind as we go through this card, this is going to be the Dorchester bomber, and this is going to be the Buccaneer planes, who are the only allied aircraft at the moment with plug slots. He doesn't get an attack or anything, so he's all about his specials that he gives the plane. So let's look into these specials. We see as Eagle Eyes. During the combat phase, choose a square. I think this means area. Choose an area within ground range 1 of this unit. Friendly ground units attacking from that area have a +1 ground range this turn. So this is pretty cool. So this basically, he's up in the sky. If you're up and above this unit within that 1 ground range based on the Aerial Aces ground range, changes, which is quite a large range around the aircraft. You can pick one of your ground units to get +1 ground range. That could be huge. That could be giving riflemen 3 range. That could be giving like artillery, like the hammer pounder, like 4 or 5 range. I don't remember if they have 4 or 5. I think they have 4. So I think that's up to 5 range. Like, that's really good. We also can take a look at Bombing Run. Bombing Run is a unit this plug is attached to, adds Carpet Bomb to all of its attacks. That could be huge. Anything benefits from that. We look at plugging him into the Dorchester Bomber, who is going to be attacking, for the most part, ground units with their attack, just trying its best to clear out some positions. Adding Bombing Run to a lot of those devastating attacks would be huge. But even the Buccaneer, if you're putting out a Buccaneer and you want it to strafe ground targets, adding Carpet Bomb will give it that strafing feel that you want, and just make it that much more deadly against ground units. This is really solid. All in all, he really makes sense into either option that you have for plugging him into. Buffing up a Buccaneer or just further solidifying a Dorchester Bomber. I think the obvious choice at first is going to be put him in the Dorchester Bomber. But I feel like it also makes sense to admit that the Dorchester Bomber is enough of a target on its own, and that having another air unit like a Buccaneer that's a little bit cheaper and different, that can also like strafe the ground targets, is very good choice as well. So all in all, I can see why you would want this plug in any of your air units. Very solid, very good specials, very good unit for only 2 deployment points. And we have the Aerial Aces addition to our ground plugs. We have the X3 Rocket. This is a plug unit who only costs 2 deployment points. We see that he only has a land range of 1, but he does have a 2 air range. So this is like an anti-air plug. So what are we looking at? They get 1 attack where they get 3 dice against armor type 1 and 2. So at the moment, that's 3 dice against any of the air units. That is very good. So this is definitely an anti-aircraft plug with a little rocket going up after the aircraft. It's still good as an anti-infantry or armor, like support or cavalry, if you plug it into a ground unit, but it is clearly meant to be anti-air, and it has a lot better range in order to do that. All in all, I absolutely love this. Feel like this has gotten quite a buff. I don't remember using the X3 rocket for anti-air in classic Rivet Wars, but in Rivet Wars Reloaded, there is no reason not to use this plug as soon as air units are in the game, or on a scenario that is heavily air unit themed. You want to make use of this plug whenever you can. Solid choice. I love it. A+. And the moment you all love, it's Reme Funck. Straight from Kickstarter exclusive classic Rivet Wars Reloaded brings him into the base Aerial Aces set. No more Kickstarter exclusivity. He is the hero air unit Reme Funck. We see that he will be a hero light aircraft. He does not have a plug slot. So again, work in progress. So these are errors. We see that he does have 1 bounty against him. He costs 2 deployment points and 1 rivet to get up into the skies. We see that he has a 3 movement with 1 minimum movement. And he's an armor type 1, but he does have 3 health to keep him up in the air. He has 1 land range and 2 air range, where he gets to make his 1 attack, which he has 3 dice against armor type 1, 2 dice against armor type 2, and 1 dice against armor type 3. And we're going to look to his specials to see more of what he can do. We see that he has Air Assault 2, so during the combat phase, he can move 2 grids before attacking. So this is like the air rapid assault, which will just help him get into position to attack other aircraft a lot easier, or I guess ground units as well, but I'm assuming he'll be dogfighting a little bit more. We see it also has barrel roll. When this unit moves, it may move to any adjacent grid once without changing its facing. So this is quite good. So in air assault or in its regular movement, it may move to any adjacent grid without changing its facing. So it can move side to side, would be a big one. And I think based on the wording, it would also be able to move backwards one without changing its facing. So I really do like this flavor of it being a barrel roll in the air and being able to, again, just set you up that much better for whatever your attack is going to be. Well, for an air assault, or getting you out of danger if it's a regular movement, you can just make those 3 movements go that much farther. So I really do love that. And we see that it has bolster defense 2. So when it's attacked, the attacker reduces the number of dice they roll by 2 to a minimum of 1. So this is huge. This gives it way more survivability. So all those units that we saw with 3 dice against armor type 1 aren't going to be getting those 3 dice against Reme Funck. A big survivability point for this hero is going to be that most things that can even touch him are probably only going to be rolling 1 dice against him. Again, hitting that minimum. So that's just going to help his survivability that much more. In the end, we are seeing a hero air unit who has a lot of maneuverability, who's going to be really tough to take down. That sounds like a menace to me personally. A very good design for an air unit. Very good flavor, and keeps a lot of the things from classic Rivet Wars Reme Funck, but giving it a whole new flavor with all the changes and updates in Aerial Ace's rule set. Reme Funck is a must-have in Reloaded, and it's great to see him. You painters are going to love painting him up and getting his plane looking however you want him to look. A great addition to Aerial Aces. Love to see it. And now we move on to the Blight. We're going to start off with the Zeppelin Bomber. The Zeppelin Bomber is a heavy aircraft with 1 plug slot. We see that it's 3 deployment points to get out up into the air. We see they have a movement of 2, but they don't have any minimum movement. So again, this is like that hovering. It is able to stay in one spot if that is an advantageous position. We see that they are armor type 2, getting a little bit more survivability with a buff, and they have 3 health. Very, very good. They have a land range of 1, but no air range, so they are only able to attack ground units. That attack is 1 blast attack, so very good. But we see that they get 3 dice against armor types 1 and 2, and 2 dice against armor types 3 and 4. So very cool, very solid. But their special adds just that little bit of extra special touch that Reloaded is doing to a lot of these units. We see they have special ammo type gas. When this unit attacks, it may add a gas attack to its attack profile, meaning that it gets a blast attack. You can choose to add a gas, which will spawn a gas token on the field. This is very good for anti-infantry, especially since it's Blight. A lot of riflemen to help clear locations and get more gas clouds out on the field. But ammo type, just like we talked about with Baron Munchen guards, also allows it to still attack units with immunity to gas with its normal attack. All in all, the way with, again, the updates to what land range means, gives this way more of a reach to attack its ground targets. And being able to drop gas clouds on top of that is going to make it that much more of a menace to Allied and Nemoan players. I love it. This feels like it got a lot of buffs, especially with a buffed armor type. A solid unit, a very solid unit. Thumbs up all around. Love to see this in Aerial Aces. Next up, we're going to be talking about the 88 Flaker, which is not pictured here. The 88 Flaker is a support unit with 1 plug slot. We see that they are 2 deployment points and 1 rivet. They only have 1 movement, so they're quite slow, but they are armor type 2 with 2 health. We see they have a land range of 2 and an air range of 2. Again, giving it that anti-air reach that it desperately needs. We see it only gets 1 attack, but it does have 2 dice against armor type 1 and 2 dice against armor type 2. And over in the specials, we do see that it buffs anti-air 1 just like its counterpart. So this unit gains +1 dice to its attack rolls when it is attacking air units, making it that much more deadly. So that's turning that attack profile into 3 dice against armor types 1 and 2. What we are seeing is something that is very solid. We're seeing that compared to its Polsten Quad Gun counterpart, the Flaker is getting 1 less attack, but it is getting 1 more dice against armor type 2. So what we are seeing is that it is basically going to be better at targeting the Dorchester bomber than the Quad Gun is going to be at targeting the Zeppelin bomber in exchange for an attack. And I, for one, do think that this is good. This is a good trade-off. It doesn't make the Flaker needlessly worse, like in Classic Rivet Wars, which was one of my complaints, was that Blight in Battle of Brighton just have a lot of needlessly unbalanced things. And something that is brought up a lot is the fact that the Blight Panzerfausts are start with an air range. So in theory, Blight as a whole faction are much better at taking on aircraft, but in practice that never became super relevant. In practice, it was always like getting unnecessarily creamed, and having a textbook AA gun that was just needlessly a little bit worse never made sense to me. However, in Reloaded and Aerial Aces, and with all the changes that are made, one, the AA guns feel like AA guns, but the Flaker does feel like there was some balance taken into effect. So it's not needlessly worse. You understand what was traded, and even though that if you did out the math, you would probably say that it's still a little bit worse than the Quad Gun. I feel like there's a lot more going on overall in Reloaded that you can say that it is for the sake of balance. For instance, buffing anti-air 1, and with the changes of how air ranges in general are calculated, I can see the argument a lot better of a Flaker with 2 Panzerfaust in its area that it's buffing extra anti-air is just going to make it that much more deadly, especially against bombers. So I really think this is a very good trade-off. And let's stop rambling, and let's get moving on to the Osprey Biplane. We can see that it is a light aircraft with 1 plug slot. It costs 2 deployment points to get into the air and get into the fight. We see it has 3 movement with a minimum movement of 1. It is armor type 1 with 2 health. We see that it has that land range of 1, but it gets a 2 air range, and it gets 1 attack, where it is getting 3 dice against armor type 1 and 2 dice against armor type 2, and we see that it has that 1 dice against armor type 3. When we're looking at the specials, we're seeing an air assault 1, so it gets that rapid assault 1 for aircraft, and it can move 1 before it attacks, just allowing it to get into position before it makes its attack. All in all, I'm liking this. I do feel like this is in line with like Classic Rivet Wars Osprey. I do feel that this is quite good. This is showing that, comparing the ones, the Buccaneer is a little bit more maneuverable than the Osprey Biplane, which is very interesting. But I do feel that the Osprey Biplane is decently equipped to go after a lot of allied aircraft. So I do think the balance there makes a lot of sense. And I think we'll be able to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about plugs. So without further ado, let's quickly move on to the Zeppelin Scout, not pictured here. The Zeppelin Scout is a light aircraft that does not have a plug slot. I think that's an error. Again, work in progress. We see that they cost 1 deployment point to get out on the field. And we see that they have 2 movement with no minimum movement, so they can do that like hovering. We can see that they are armor type 1 with 1 health, so they're quite easy to get shot down. We can see they have 1 land range, but unlike the gyroplane, they also get 1 air range. We can see they get 1 attack, where they have 2 dice against armor types 1, 2, and 3. So all in all, what I am seeing is this is a solid, like, again, air infantry, it feels. Instead of getting a chain attack with its attack, it's just a regular 1 attack, but it does get to use that against other aircraft. Again, showing where that kind of balance is. With the changes with how all the ranges work, it is also more useful against ground things, getting that same buff that the gyroplane would. In the end, it's a solid unit, like it's a good unit. All the same things I said for the gyroplane for this. I can now see why you would basically want this to be like air infantry. It makes sense. It is cheap to get out on the field with your other units, and it is just useful enough that I can fully understand getting it out there. I definitely would probably play around with using these and what strategies would come of them. Way more than I did in classic Rivet Wars. I get it. And I'm very looking forward to seeing how the meta kind of changes these units and how more likely I am to put these scouts out on the field with all the changes. And keeping things moving, we have the Blight Hero Air Plug, Volker Hawken. Volker Hawken costs 2 deployment points. And as always, we see that they are the specials. And his specials are super interesting, so let's talk about it. So what we're seeing is he gives +1 movement to any unit he plugs into. So I will remind you that at the moment in Aerial Aces, the only units with plug slots for the Blight are the Zeppelin Bomber and the Osprey. So this would be giving them +1 movement. Very good, I feel. But an interesting balance is it also would give +1 minimum movement to that unit. So it's basically adding an additional minimum movement to these units. So for the Zeppelin Bomber, this would be basically adding a minimum movement to them. So that's very interesting. And the Osprey would mean that it would have a minimum of 2 movement that it would need to move for that additional movement. It would also add nimble, giving this unit an extra rotation during when it moves. Ooh, this one specifically calls out during the movement phase. I wonder if they'll have to change that wording. Again, these are works in progress. But that's interesting. Look, every time you go through this is like my 3rd time recording this video, and every time you look at these cards, you see something different. Very interesting. That's why I kind of do love pouring over and talking about these stats. So what's the strategy with Volker Hawken? I think it's very obvious in the Zeppelin Bomber. It's giving it 3 movement. You're adding a minimum movement, so it's got to keep on the move. But with nimble, it's still able to like turn, and it'll basically circle whatever target instead of just kind of hovering. And I think with the changes to the land range, that's not going to affect it that much. But giving it that extra movement could be the difference to getting it into position to make its attacks instead of just being a target for other aircraft during your enemy's next turn. I think that is a very good trade-off. And for an Osprey biplane, putting him in there, it is just making it that much faster, that much more maneuverable, going against the allied planes. I think that either choice is a very smart choice, depending on how you want to play the air game. This is a very good unit, like very good. I can definitely see why you would deploy Volker Hawken. I don't see an obvious one for the other, like with Charles on the allied side, that you would probably want him in the Dorchester bomber more than the Buccaneer. I don't know who you'd want him in more in the Blight side. Like, the benefits to either would be much needed in an air superiority battle against the Allies. So, good design, a solid unit. I like him. We're getting close to the end, so we're moving on because I want this video done. We have the MG anti-air plug. This is a ground plug for the Blight. This plug will cost 2 deployment points to get into units. We see they have a land range of 1, but they get that 2 air range, which with the changes of reloaded air ranges is a very good buff. So just like the rocket with the Allies, this anti-air, the MG anti-air, could add some serious anti-aircraft power to any Blight unit it's plugged into. And that power is going to come in the form of 2 attacks. 2 dice against armor type 1 and 1 dice against armor type 2 against ground units with that 1 land range. Those aren't really that good to make them worth it. If this was in like the Landskriger or something, I guess that would make sense. And it's just that much extra, like it's 2 additional attacks. The more times you get to roll the dice, the better your day is going to go. So that's nothing to shake a stick at. But with that extra air range, 2 additional attacks against the allied planes, even with that bolster defense, meaning that it's going to be 1 dice, that's going to just be more dice against air targets. It's going to be a lot more giving different units, or putting it on your quad gun and getting that anti-air buff to it, where it's 3 dice instead. It's just going to be that much better against all of the air units. Very solid, very good, makes sense, and it's a cheap enough plug to put into a unit. It makes sense. If you need help with an allied player who is just dominating, it makes perfect sense of why you would put this in one of your tanks being targeted by a bomber or something, and just have that much more anti-air defenses. Very good, very solid. And last but not least, the man of the hour, we have the Red Baron, who is the hero light aircraft unit for the Blight. So we see that he is a hero light aircraft unit. He does not have a plug slot. That is a mistake, work in progress. He does have 1 bounty on his head. We see that he has 2 deployment points and 1 rivet to get into the air. He has 3 movement, but a minimum movement of 1. We're seeing that he is 1 armor type, but he has 3 health. So that's pretty standard. He has only 1 land range, but 2 air range. And here's where some of the heat comes in. He has 2 attacks. These 2 attacks, he gets 3 dice against armor type 1, 2 dice against armor type 2, and 1 dice against armor type 3. Ooh, that's going to be quite good. I feel like I just said the words. The more you get to roll dice, the better day you're going to have. And we have some of its specials. So we see the Air Assault 2, giving him 2 grids before attacking. That's just better. And we see that he gets that Nimble, being able to turn an additional time when they move. Ooh, this one as well says during the movement phase only. I wonder if that'll affect Air Assault. Anyways, so we're just seeing a lot of maneuverability. So what we're seeing is that he doesn't have as much of the survivability as Reme Funck or like the Buccaneers. He doesn't get any of those bolster defense. However, even with the reduction, extra attacks means that he gets double the shot. So if you're looking at like Red Baron versus Reme Funck, he gets 2 less dice against him. So he's rolling 1 dice, but with 2 attacks, it basically like he's getting 2 dice against him. So, I mean, it's just that much better. Again, anytime you get to roll more dice against things, he's going to get basically 2 shots, 2 attacks with 2 dice against the Dorchester Bomber. That's going to be a big deal. Like, there's just a lot of good going on with this unit. A lot of reason to fear him when he's in the skies. The Blight need that extra oomph in the skies against a bunch of the the bolster defense units that are up in the air. But I do feel that it makes a lot of sense, and he is a scary unit. If the Allies do not respond with a lot of air units of their own, he could also be quite the menace attacking targets on the ground with 2 attacks. Even if it's against a tank with 1 dice each, that's 2 more dice against that tank. Like, honestly, he will change the name of the game when he's deployed, and he is a scary air unit, so it makes a lot of sense. And like I said with Reme Funck, it is just so good to see him taking off of Kickstarter exclusive for Classic Rivet Wars and being put in the base set of Aerial Assault in Reloaded. So good. A very solid decision to be made, because honestly, these hero units were amazing and really helped bolster the airplay of Battle of Brighton. So I'm so glad to see them made an official standard set of aerial aces, ensuring that no one has to go without these hero air units in Rivet Wars Reloaded. And with that, hopefully we're all done. We're all set. This is, again, my millionth time doing this. I'll have to check the audio, and I don't know what I'm going to do if the audio is still wrong. I'll have to like record it separately on a different audio program, as OBS is failing me over and over again. I'm not going to ramble for a ton of time at the end. This is that. It says it's about $120 value here. Yeah, I would say yeah. You'll see it anywhere Rivet Wars people gather, which are links all down below in the description. People always talk about Battle of Brighton changed the feel of Rivet Wars, and in many ways completed the feel of classic Rivet Wars. Seeing it make its return in Rivet Wars Reloaded just makes sense. And I can't see this not basically defining the feel of Rivet Wars Reloaded, especially with all the changes. If you haven't seen it in the cards, the little bleep bloop in the corner there, we do have another video where we go through the Aerial Aces rulebook and talk about all the rules and some of the changes and like how I thought that it would affect the game. We've been kind of talking about some of it here, but honestly, this has been extremely solid. A very good set of units. It's good to see their return. And of course, keep in mind, this isn't just another only units expansion. This comes with their stands, but this will also come with its own scenarios. It's got its own rule book. It has its own mission and action cards that are directly specific to aerial aces and air units. So another video, we'll probably go over those. With that said, let's wrap up this video because this is the end of the work in progress unit stats videos. I'm super happy to wrap this up and get back into doing whatever I want. There are so many other things we can do from those PDFs. I kind of want to do one talking about different scenarios that we were given and what the implications are. I definitely want to do a video going over the lore. I think going over the mission cards should be a must, so that when we go over the scenarios, we can kind of get the hint together of what the mission side of completing that victory requirement would actually look like how hard or easy it is in certain ones. I also want to go over the action cards. They change the game. Like we've been talking about unit stats and throwing in some strategy and the like, but action cards have a huge change to the game. There's so much more to talk about before May comes. So let me know down in the comments. Let me know how you feel about the air units. And also what video you want to see going forward. And again, this is like my third time doing this. I really hope that the audio lasts. Honestly, I'm just going to do something else if it fails. I don't know what I'll do, but I will do something else if it fails. But yeah, that's the end of that. And I'm tired and I really want this to be done and edited and up before I have to make another video. So thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe for more steampunk content. This is a steampunk channel, even though it doesn't look it because it's all Rivet Wars all the time right now. But I do love Rivet Wars and I will cover it until I'm the end of the earth. Remember that, fingers crossed, no more delays, but remember that it was delayed and that the current fulfillment time is May 2024, which is coming. We're going to blink and it'll be there. We're already in February at the time that I'm re-recording this. So we're going to blink and it will be May. I'm super excited, always on the lookout. Hopefully we'll get more updates as we're getting closer to fulfillment. We've been seeing a lot of behind the scenes videos, so I cannot wait. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe. Go check out my other Rivet Wars videos. We talk about the other stats, and definitely, at least bare minimum, if you didn't watch it, look at the other Aerial Aces video where we go through the rule book and talk about the mechanics and they change. That will put this way more in light to figure out what all these stats mean in Reloaded, and get a little bit of a better idea of how these are going to be a lot easier to take down, but also how much more useful they've gotten with how the ranges have changed. So awesome. I'm so done. I will see you guys in the next video. Links down below to where Rivet Wars is. The Discord, the Reddit, the Facebook page, which is official, the Facebook group is the official place where Steamforged Games is, as well as Board Game Geek. It's all down in the description below. So I will see you guys in the next video. Get in the fight.